state or city you are tuning in from to enjoy this tale. It can continue to grow and bring you even more captivating stories. The grand opening night of Jason's luxury boutique hotel in Manhattan was an extravagant affair. Brilliant spotlights swept across the towering, sleek facade of the building, cutting through the New York City night. A long red carpet stretched from the edge of the avenue all the way to the main entrance. Hundreds of invited guests, ranging from Wall Street tycoons to high-profile politicians, walked in with supreme confidence. Jason stood near the entrance, his chest puffed out in a tailored tuxedo. A proud smile never left his face. He felt he had finally reached the absolute pinnacle of success. The man eagerly accepted every handshake and word of praise with inflated pride. Standing right beside him was Vanessa, his personal secretary. She was draped in a ridiculously expensive designer gown and flashy diamond jewelry, acting for all the world as if she were the lady of the house hosting the grand event. A short distance away from the hustle and bustle of the main entrance, a standard yellow cab pulled up. Audrey stepped out of the vehicle at a slow, measured pace. She wore a modest, ankle-length beige dress and a simple, unbranded scarf draped elegantly over her head. There was not a single piece of jewelry on her body, and her face was completely free of heavy makeup. Her appearance was a stark contrast to the elite guests who were fiercely competing to show off their wealth. Audrey had come with pure intentions. She simply wanted to witness the success of the man who had been her husband for the past 5 years. Audrey had willingly concealed her true identity as the supreme CEO of a massive global private equity firm. She deliberately lived a life of total simplicity so that Jason would feel that all his achievements were the result of his own hard work. In secret, it was Audrey who had been funneling massive amounts of capital to build Jason's company from the ground up until it became the empire it was tonight. As Audrey walked closer to the event, a few guests began to whisper. They looked her up and down with condescending glares, wondering how a woman in such plain, ordinary clothes dared to enter this prestigious gathering. However, Audrey ignored their stares. Her only focus was finding Jason. When her eyes finally caught sight of her husband laughing with a group of VIPs, her heart felt warm. She intended to walk over and congratulate him, but her steps were abruptly halted when Vanessa suddenly appeared, blocking her path. Vanessa held a crystal glass filled with a bright red cosmopolitan in her right hand. Her gaze was razor-sharp and full of venomous hatred. She knew exactly who Audrey was. She knew this plain woman was Jason's legal wife. Vanessa had always felt that a nobody like Audrey was completely unfit to stand beside a successful man like Jason. With deliberately quickened steps, Vanessa marched straight toward Audrey, giving her absolutely no room to dodge. Vanessa violently rammed her shoulder into Audrey. The glass tilted, and the bright red cocktails sloshed out, completely soaking the front of Audrey's dress. Startled, Audrey took a step back to keep her balance as the sticky liquid dripped onto the pristine marble floor. The lively atmosphere around them instantly fell dead silent. The elite guests stopped their conversations and turned to see what the commotion was about. Instead of apologizing, Vanessa practically shrieked, so the entire room could hear. "Are you completely blind? Look at my dress! It's almost ruined because you bumped into me! Where did you even crawl out from? How dare a beggar like you sneak into a luxury event like this and cause a scene?" Vanessa yelled, staring at Audrey with utter disgust. Audrey tried to suppress the raging storm in her chest. She looked at Vanessa calmly and replied with a firm voice. "You deliberately walked straight into me. Why are you twisting the facts and blaming me?" Hearing Audrey's bold response, Vanessa felt humiliated in front of the crowd. Her anger boiled over. Without a single thought for the consequences, Vanessa raised her hand and delivered a vicious, stinging slap right across Audrey's face. The sharp smack echoed loudly through the silent lobby. Audrey's head jerked to the side from the sheer force of the blow. A burning heat spread across her cheek, but the pain in her heart was infinitely deeper. Everyone present froze in shock. The commotion finally reached Jason's ears. He hastily excused himself from his associates and power-walked toward the disturbance. When he saw his wife standing there in a stained dress and Vanessa holding her own hand as if she were the victim, Jason's face turned crimson with rage. He felt profoundly embarrassed that his wife had shown up looking like a peasant, dragging his reputation through the mud. Audrey looked into Jason's eyes, desperately hoping her husband would ask if she was okay and defend her. "Jason, this woman purposefully ran into me and slapped me in front of everyone," Audrey said, her voice quiet but undeniably clear. But Audrey's hopes shattered in an instant. Jason didn't care about her explanation at all. He marched forward, his temper exploding. With brutal force, he grabbed the collar of Audrey's coat and yanked her close. His eyes projected pure, unadulterated contempt. "Don't you dare embarrass me at the most important event of my life. Look at you. You ruin everything. Vanessa is my top executive. There is no way she would attack you without a reason. You obviously started this because of your pathetic, baseless jealousy." Jason roared right in Audrey's face. "You're choosing to defend this woman and blame your own wife?" Audrey asked, her voice trembling slightly as she held back an overwhelming wave of disappointment. "What wife? All you do is drag me down. Get the hell out of here right now, or I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning," Jason threatened without an ounce of hesitation. He then shoved Audrey's shoulders so hard she nearly lost her footing. Behind him, Vanessa flashed a triumphant, wicked smirk. Audrey fell silent. She lowered her head, but she did not cry. Slowly, a chilling, ice-cold smile formed on her lips. Her 5 years of endless patience had officially run out tonight. All her sacrifices had been repaid with the most agonizing betrayal and humiliation imaginable. She turned to leave, but at that exact moment, the heavy roar of engines shattered the quiet murmur of the New York night. A long motorcade of blacked-out Escalades pulled into the hotel's grand driveway in perfect formation. Dozens of heavily built bodyguards stepped out, forming an impenetrable security perimeter. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see which titan of industry had just arrived. The sheer presence of the motorcade made the atmosphere in the lobby incredibly tense. Jason instantly swallowed his anger and rearranged his face. He quickly smoothed his tuxedo lapels, his mind racing with the hope that this VIP would bring massive investments to his business. Vanessa also adjusted her posture, pasting on the sweetest, most seductive smile she could muster. All eyes locked onto the lead SUV. A bodyguard quickly opened the rear door. Out stepped a middle-aged man who was practically treated like royalty on Wall Street. It was Mr. Kingsley. He was known as the ruthless CEO of the largest hedge fund in the country, a man holding enough power to make or break multinational corporations with the snap of his fingers. His attendance was an absolute miracle for Jason. Jason felt his blood rush with excitement. He practically jogged over to Mr. Kingsley, leaving his other guests behind. "Good evening, Mr. Kingsley. I am beyond honored that you took the time to attend our grand opening," Jason greeted, bowing his head deeply and extending both hands for a respectful handshake. Vanessa, trailing closely behind, also offered a deep, reverent bow. But what happened next froze Jason to his core. Mr. Kingsley didn't slow his stride. He didn't acknowledge Jason's greeting, didn't smile, and left Jason's extended hands hanging awkwardly in the air. The Wall Street titan walked right past Jason, as if he were entirely invisible. Jason's face stiffened into a mask of pure mortification as he was ignored in front of his own crowd. Mr. Kingsley walked with absolute purpose, parting the sea of elites. He made a beeline straight for the woman standing near the exit, Audrey, whose coat was still stained with the spilled cocktail. Stopping inches away from her, the terrifyingly powerful CEO snapped his feet together and bowed a perfect, deep 90 degrees right in front of Audrey. The perimeter bodyguards simultaneously executed the exact same gesture of absolute respect. The lobby was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Vanessa clamped her hands over her mouth in sheer horror. Jason's eyes widened to the size of saucers, unable to process the impossible scene unfolding before him. "I apologize deeply for my late arrival, boss. Did one of these lower-level executives dare to disrespect you inside your own property?" Mr. Kingsley's voice was crystal clear, sharp, and cut through the silence like a knife. Those words hit Jason's brain like a freight train. The title boss, and the declaration that the hotel belonged to Audrey, caused his mind to short-circuit. His legs felt like jelly as he stumbled over to them, his face drained of all color. "Mr. Kingsley, there must be some mistake. You have the wrong person." Jason stammered violently. "This is Audrey. She's just my stay-at-home wife. She doesn't have a job. She doesn't have any money. There is no way she is your boss." Mr. Kingsley slowly turned his head to glare at Jason. His gaze was lethal. "Watch your mouth in the presence of our supreme executive. The private equity firm that bankrolled every single brick of this building, the firm that absorbed all your massive corporate debt, is headed directly by Mrs. Audrey. The very marble you are standing on was purchased with her money." Jason stumbled back several steps, His knees knocked together. He stared at Audrey, desperately searching for the truth in the face of the woman he had belittled for years. Audrey stood calmly. An aura of absolute crushing authority radiated from her, completely overshadowing her stained, simple clothing. Vanessa, standing further back, began to tremble uncontrollably, realizing she had just physically assaulted the most powerful person in the room. Audrey lifted her chin and locked eyes with Jason. There was not a single trace of love left in her gaze. "You think you are so brilliant, Jason. You thought you could just toss me aside like garbage. Earlier, you told me to get out and promised me a divorce. I accept your terms." Audrey then turned to her subordinate. "Kingsley, have my divorce papers delivered to his desk first thing tomorrow morning. And listen to my next order very carefully. Terminate all partnerships, freeze all credit lines, and pull every single cent of funding from this man. Shut it all down tonight." "Your orders will be executed immediately, boss," Mr. Kingsley replied, bowing once more. Panic seized Jason. He lunged forward to grab Audrey's arm. "Audrey, wait. Let's go inside and talk about this. Please don't do this to me." But before Jason could even graze her sleeve, two massive bodyguards violently swatted his hands away and shoved him back. Audrey turned on her heel and walked to the waiting Escalade. She slipped into the back seat, without ever looking back. The motorcade glided smoothly out of the driveway, leaving Jason shattered in a puddle of regret and confusion. The night that was supposed to be his crowning achievement had just become the prologue to a long, agonizing nightmare. He stood paralyzed, staring at the empty avenue, entirely unready for the brutal reality of his impending ruin. The morning sun pierced through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jason's massive corner office, overlooking the Manhattan skyline. But the bright light did nothing to chase away the suffocating darkness swallowing his mind. He paced frantically behind his mahogany desk. Cold sweat dripped from his forehead. Even with the AC blasted to its lowest setting, he couldn't stop trembling. He hadn't slept a wink. His mind endlessly replayed the humiliation in the lobby, Kingsley's lethal glare, and Audrey's absolute chilling calmness. Fear clawed its way up his throat, choking him. What if Mr. Kingsley had told the truth? What if he had truly been living off the charity of the woman he had constantly degraded and violently kicked out? The heavy oak doors of his office slowly creaked open. Vanessa strolled in, her hips swaying with that calculated, seductive walk she always used to keep his attention. She wasn't in her evening gown anymore, but wore a sharp, tailored pencil skirt and a silk blouse, flaunting the expensive Cartier jewelry Jason had bought her. She shut the door tightly and approached the desk, noting how pale and desperate her golden goose looked. Vanessa knew she had to act fast before Jason completely spiraled and left her with nothing. She lived entirely off draining his bank accounts. Her gravy train was about to derail because of one threat last night. "Jason, honey, stop torturing yourself!" Vanessa purred, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. She stood behind his leather chair and began massaging his tense shoulders. Jason stopped pacing and pinched the bridge of his nose hard. "How can I be calm, Vanessa? You heard exactly what Kingsley said last night. He called Audrey the supreme executive in front of the entire city. If that's true, this company is dead in the water. Every dime of our major funding came from his firm. I could be out on the street losing everything." His voice cracked, reflecting the sheer panic in his chest. Vanessa smiled a sly, venomous smile. She walked around the desk and casually sat in one of the plush visitor chairs, looking Jason dead in the eyes. "Jason, listen to yourself. Use your brain for a second. Since when did you become such a weak, gullible man? Think about your life with Audrey over the last 5 years. Did you ever, even once, see a single sign that she was a multi-billionaire?" Jason paused, digging through his memories of their mundane domestic life. Slowly, he shook his head. "No, she cooked dinner every single night. She mopped the floors. She did my laundry by hand. She even fought with me every time I offered to hire a maid. She wore cheap clothes from outlet malls. She never asked for diamonds or luxury vacations. And, exactly my point," Vanessa snapped her fingers triumphantly, leaning closer. "People with that kind of unfathomable wealth and power do not willingly live like indentured servants. Don't be an idiot, Jason. There is no way a frumpy house mouse like her is running Wall Street. She's a pawn, a prop being used by someone else to mentally destroy you." Jason frowned, desperate for any excuse to salvage his bruised ego. "What do you mean? Who is using her?" It's corporate sabotage, Jason. Your competitors are terrified of your rapid expansion after last night's launch. They know you are ambitious and untouchable. So, they colluded with Kingsley to break your spirit from the inside. They hired your naive, broke wife, dressed her up in a narrative, and told her to act like a boss. Their only goal is to terrify you into handing over your assets for pennies on the dollar without a fight. Audrey is just a cheap actress. They probably offered her a fat check to betray you. Vanessa's toxic lies flowed smoothly, seeping into Jason's mind like water into parched earth. Jason's monstrous arrogance eagerly swallowed the delusion. A narcissistic man like him could never accept that his empire was built by a woman, especially the woman he viewed as a burden. Vanessa's theory protected his fragile masculinity and reaffirmed his belief that he was a self-made genius. The fear vanished from his face, quickly replaced by a furious, burning red anger. "You're right, Vanessa. You are so damn smart," Jason muttered, clenching his fists. "I almost fell for their cheap parlor trick. Kingsley is using dirty tactics, a hostile takeover. And that ungrateful bitch Audrey dared to publicly humiliate me for a payout from my rivals. You're right. I won't back down. I'll show them I'm a titan who doesn't fold to theatrics." "Exactly. Cut all legal ties with that traitor today. Show them you don't need her or their fake threats," Vanessa urged, throwing gasoline on the fire. Right on cue, a sharp knock interrupted them. A stern man in a tailored suit walked into the office carrying a thick manila folder. It was a high-end corporate lawyer. He didn't offer a greeting, merely dropping the folder onto Jason's desk with a dull thud. Inside were the official divorce papers, alongside a comprehensive waiver of all claims to marital assets, already signed by Audrey. The lawyer looked at Jason with a deadpan expression. "Miss Audrey requires your signature immediately, unconditionally, as per your own request last night." Jason let out a loud, theatrical laugh, a desperate attempt to mask his lingering nerves and show off for Vanessa. He grabbed his Mont Blanc pen. "Tell that broke peasant I'm not falling for her dirty games. I'm throwing her out on the street myself, and I'll make sure she regrets it." With arrogant, sweeping strokes, Jason signed his name across the documents without reading a single clause. He tossed the folder back at the lawyer, wrinkling the pristine pages. "Get this garbage out of my office." The lawyer calmly collected the papers, gave a curt nod, and exited. Once the door clicked shut, Jason looked at Vanessa and grinned. "I just removed the dead weight from my life. Nobody can stop my rise now. We're celebrating today, Vanessa." Jason had no idea that a few miles away, in a breathtaking penthouse office overlooking Central Park, Audrey was sitting calmly in her executive chair. She accepted the signed documents from Mr. Kingsley. She examined Jason's signature with eyes as cold as a New York winter. Not a single tear fell. 5 years of pure devotion, repaid with unspeakable cruelty. "Boss, the documents are fully executed and legally binding. He waived all corporate and personal protections we secretly provided him, and he didn't even read the fine print." "Mr. Kingsley reported, standing at attention. Audrey set the folder down and gently tapped her manicured fingers against the polished glass desk. She stared out at the sprawling city below. "Excellent. He is so hopelessly arrogant. Let's see how far this titan can walk without the floor I built beneath his feet. Initiate the liquidation protocol immediately, Kingsley. Let him feel what it's like to plummet from the top of the world." The next morning broke with bright sunshine, a deceptive promise of a perfect day. For Jason, it was his first day as a legally free, triumphant billionaire, rid of a wife he deemed an embarrassment. To celebrate his victory and prove Kingsley's threats were empty, Jason took Vanessa on a massive shopping spree on Fifth Avenue before heading to the office. They swaggered into an exclusive VIP-only diamond boutique. Vanessa's eyes practically glazed over with greed as she pointed at diamond necklaces, platinum bracelets, and the latest designer watches. Acting like royalty, Jason told the clerk to box up everything Vanessa pointed at, not even bothering to ask the price. The clerk smiled warmly and tallied the bill, which came out to a staggering several $1,000,000. Jason casually pulled out his legendary black card, the ultimate status symbol of endless credit. He handed it over with a smug flick of his wrist. The clerk inserted the metal card into the terminal. A few seconds later, a sharp beep echoed. "Declined." The clerk frowned slightly and tried swiping it again. "Declined." The terminal flashed red. "I apologize, sir, but your issuing bank has declined the transaction. Do you have an alternative method of payment?" the clerk asked politely. Though the words were loud enough for nearby elite shoppers to hear, Jason's face flushed violently. He felt utterly humiliated. That's impossible. Your machine must be broken. That card has no limit. Run it again and stop wasting my time, he barked. The clerk tried a third time. Same result. Grumbling furiously, Jason whipped out his designer wallet and threw down 4 different platinum and corporate cards. One by one, the clerk ran them. One by one, they were unequivocally rejected. Cold sweat drenched Jason's designer shirt. Vanessa, standing nearby, began to shift uncomfortably, staring at Jason with a demanding, panicked expression. Not wanting to lose any more face, Jason grabbed Vanessa's wrist and stormed out of the boutique, loudly cursing the store's outdated technology. But an icy dread had settled in his stomach. When his chauffeur dropped them off at his corporate headquarters, the scene in the lobby was utter chaos. It didn't look like a successful enterprise. It looked like a sinking ship. The atrium was packed with shouting contractors and panicked employees sprinting with stacks of files. As soon as Jason walked through the doors, his CFO ran up to him, hyperventilating and pale as a ghost. "Jason! We are in catastrophic trouble!" the CFO shouted without even a good morning. "Every single supplier halted deliveries at 8 a.m. The steel, concrete, and lumber companies all unilaterally terminated our contracts. They said our letters of credit and financial guarantees are completely void as of this morning. And that's not even the worst part. Every major bank holding our corporate debt has been calling since dawn. They are calling in the loans. They want full repayment in cash. Today." Jason felt the floor drop out from under him. He pushed past the CFO, sprinting up the stairs to his office. He slammed the door, grabbed his desk phone, and frantically dialed his most trusted VIP banking contacts. One after another, it went straight to voicemail. Everyone had blacklisted him. The arrogance he had rebuilt just hours ago shattered, replaced by raw, paralyzing terror. He couldn't let his empire die. He rushed back down to his car and ordered his driver to speed to the Manhattan headquarters of Chase Bank, where his largest credit lines were held. Upon arriving, he bypassed the line and stormed toward the branch executive's office. Security guards tried to grab him, but he thrashed against them, screaming his name and demanding respect. Hearing the commotion, the branch manager opened his door. His expression was ice cold. There was no trace of the fawning respect he usually gave Jason. "Why are you causing a scene in my lobby, Jason?" the manager asked, his voice entirely devoid of warmth. "What the hell is the meaning of freezing all my accounts and calling in my debt today? My cash flow is immaculate. I just launched a mega resort last night. I am a priority client here," Jason screamed. The manager sighed with visible disgust and stepped aside, gesturing for Jason to enter so he wouldn't make a scene in public. Once the door was shut, the manager walked to his desk and pulled out a massive, heavily stamped ledger. He slammed it on the desk right in front of Jason. "With all due respect, Jason, you are no longer a client here, let alone a priority one," the manager said coldly. "Those massive credit lines and billion-dollar loans you secured? They were never approved based on your company's actual revenue. They were approved solely because you had an ironclad, anonymous corporate guarantor backing you. The absolute guarantor for your entire enterprise was Mrs. Audrey." Jason's eyes bulged out of his head. His heart hammered so hard it hurt his ribs. "That is a lie. Audrey doesn't have a dime to her name. Check your system. There has to be a clerical error." "There is no error, Jason," the manager cut him off sharply. "As of 7 a.m. today, Mrs. Audrey legally revoked all financial protections and guarantees shielding your assets. Without her backing, our risk assessment algorithms immediately flagged your company as a critical default risk. You have mountains of debt and zero collateral. Tomorrow morning, our legal department will file for emergency foreclosure to seize your corporate towers, your hotel, and your private assets, unless you can wire us the full balance in cash by 5 p.m. today." Jason's legs gave out. He stumbled backward, collapsing heavily into a leather guest chair. His mind was a blank void. Vanessa's venomous lies about actresses and corporate sabotage evaporated upon contact with the cold, hard banking documents sitting on the desk. Audrey, the wife he called a peasant, the woman he mentally abused and threw out on the street, was truly the undisputed owner of his entire life. The wealth he flaunted to his frat brothers, the luxurious lifestyle he showered upon Vanessa, It was all charity from a woman he never respected. Jason wandered out of the bank like a soulless zombie, dragging his feet across the pavement. Vanessa was waiting anxiously in the back of his Maybach. Seeing Jason's deathly pale face and hollow eyes, she instantly knew the truth. Last night wasn't a bluff. They were ruined. But Vanessa's greedy, cunning mind operated at lightning speed. She refused to go down with his sinking ship. As Jason sat paralyzed in despair, a memory flashed into Vanessa's mind. There was a dark, dusty storage room in the basement of Jason's headquarters. In that room sat a heavy, old-fashioned steel safe that belonged to Audrey. Audrey used to sit in that basement and work quietly while Jason was asleep. Vanessa knew Audrey kept her most valuable, highly classified business concepts locked inside. A wicked smile crept onto Vanessa's face. Stealing the contents of that safe was her golden ticket out of poverty. Leaving Jason to wallow in his office, Vanessa took the service elevator down to the sub-basement. The room was damp, reeking of mildew, and piled high with broken office chairs. In the far corner sat Audrey's old safe. Vanessa wiped the dust off the keypad, grinning maliciously. She pulled out her burner phone and called a shady contact, an underground safecracker from the Bronx she knew from her darker days. Late that night, when the building was entirely deserted, Vanessa smuggled the hacker into the basement. He brought a duffel bag full of drills and electronic bypass rigs. By the dim light of a flashlight, the hacker worked for 2 hours. Finally, a soft click echoed from the heavy steel door. Vanessa ruthlessly shoved the man aside without a word of thanks and yanked the door open. Inside were stacks of thick, premium-bound dossiers. She pulled them out greedily. Her eyes widened as she read the gold-embossed title on the top folder. Master Blueprint, the Diamond Crest Resort. Vanessa flipped through the pages, her breath hitching. Even though she wasn't an architect, she could see this was a masterpiece. The architectural renderings were breathtaking. The financial projections were flawlessly mapped out to generate billions, and the target demographic strategy was sheer genius. It was the magnum opus of a true titan of industry. Vanessa smiled so wide, her face hurt. She had just found the treasure chest that would save her life. The next morning, Vanessa marched into Jason's office and slammed the stolen blueprints onto his desk. Jason flinched, looking up with bloodshot, swollen eyes from crying all night. He glared at her for interrupting his misery. "Stop crying over your dead company, Jason," Vanessa commanded confidently. "Look at what I pulled from the basement. This is our salvation. This is how you steal back everything your arrogant ex-wife took from you." Jason sighed lethargically and opened the first page. Initially, he skimmed it with indifference. But as he turned page after page, his eyes widened. His heart began to race. He read the exact ROI projections, the elite marketing strategy, the flawless structural schematics. It was the most brilliant, bulletproof mega project he had ever seen in his life. If built, it would generate tens of billions in a matter of months. He looked up at Vanessa in absolute awe. He recognized the handwriting in the margins. It was pure Audrey. "How the hell did you get something this classified?" Jason asked, his voice trembling with a sudden rush of euphoric greed. "This is a flawless roadmap. There's not a single weak link. It doesn't matter how I got it. What matters is that it's in your hands now." Vanessa hyped him up, squeezing his shoulders. Audrey spent years secretly drafting this for her own fund. Now, we steal it. We pitch this to foreign venture capitalists who don't know a thing about your divorce drama. With a pitch this good, European money will violently bid against each other to give you billions. We won't need Kingsley or your ex ever again. Vanessa's toxic flattery resurrected the dead monster of Jason's ego. His despair vanished, entirely consumed by blinding, ravenous greed. He convinced himself that he, a strong, visionary man, was far more capable of executing this plan than a woman like Audrey. He immediately rallied his few remaining loyal executives. They worked 72 hours straight, digitally recreating the blueprints, scrubbing Audrey's name, plastering Jason's logo all over it, and building a world-class PowerPoint presentation. A few days later, Jason and Vanessa walked into a massive, opulent boardroom at the Ritz-Carlton. They had secured a meeting with a group of stern, suited Swiss venture capitalists looking to break into the American market. Jason wore his finest bespoke suit. Vanessa wore a tailored power dress. Across the mahogany table sat three unsmiling European executives. Jason stood up and pitched the Diamond Crest Resort with fiery charisma. He explained the luxury demographics, the geographic strategy, and the guaranteed exponential returns as if the genius ideas had sprouted from his own brain. He even threw in exaggerated, fraudulent promises to sweeten the deal. The foreign investors whispered among themselves, nodding as they scrutinized the stolen dossiers. When the pitch ended, the lead investor broke into a wide smile and stood up to shake Jason's hand. Absolutely phenomenal presentation, Mr. Jason. We have never seen a project this structurally sound in this market. Our firm is completely on board. We will provide full-scale, unlimited funding from groundbreaking to the grand opening. Jason felt like he was floating. He had done it. He had conned them all. He had saved his name, his reputation, and secured a path to wealth that would eclipse Audrey's. He shot Vanessa a look of supreme victory, silently laughing at Audrey's attempts to ruin him. After handshakes and celebrations, Jason and Vanessa walked out of the Ritz. They laughed hysterically in the lavish hallway, but amid their gloating, Vanessa's phone buzzed in her purse. She pulled it out and saw a text message from an unknown number. It contained only 5 words, but it made the hair on her arms stand up. The bait has been swallowed. Vanessa frowned, her heart skipping a beat. But unwilling to ruin the high of their victory, she assumed it was spam, deleted the text, and didn't mention a word of it to Jason. The following morning, Jason marched into his headquarters like a conquering emperor. He told his terrified accounting team to ignore the bank foreclosures because a multi-billion-dollar wire transfer was landing this afternoon. He announced that the Swiss investors were coming in today to sign the binding, finalized contracts. Right on time, the European executives arrived carrying thick, leather-bound briefcases. They sat opposite Jason and Vanessa in the CEO's office. The lead investor pulled out a massive stack of legal documents filled with dense, microscopic corporate jargon. The investor looked serious. Jason, because your domestic credit rating was suddenly decimated this week, our compliance department requires a much higher tier of absolute collateral for a cash injection this large. You must sign over the deeds to everything you currently own, your remaining company shares, the corporate tower, your personal Hamptons estate, and all liquid assets. It's merely a formality to secure the construction phase. Once the resort turns a profit in month 1, the liens are fully dissolved. Jason stared at the towering stack of contracts. A cold sliver of doubt pierced his arrogance, pledging literally every last thing he owned was a financial suicide mission if anything went wrong. He flipped through the pages, his eyes randomly catching a highly specific, bolded clause. In the event of intellectual property theft, plagiarism, or copyright violation regarding the submitted architectural blueprints, the borrower shall be subject to an immediate, non-negotiable penalty equal to 100 times the value of the initial investment. Jason swallowed hard. He knew damn well he had stolen every single pixel of those blueprints from Audrey. Seeing his hand hovering over the pen in hesitation, Vanessa leaned in and hissed poison into his ear. Jason, don't be a coward when we're at the finish line. Remember how Audrey and Kingsley humiliated you? They are waiting for you to become a homeless beggar. If you back out now, you're dead. Besides, who is ever going to know? Audrey never formally registered this idea with the patent office. This is your only chance to shut her mouth and prove you are a god compared to her. Her words hit exactly the right trigger. His bruised ego couldn't bear the thought of looking weak in front of men ready to hand him billions. Driven by sheer, blinding hubris, Jason grabbed his Mont Blanc pen and aggressively signed his name on every single dotted line. He blindly signed his soul away, ignorant of the lethal snare snapping shut around his neck. The deal is sealed, Jason. The initial construction capital will hit your offshore accounts by tomorrow morning. The lead investor smiled, packing the signed death warrants into his briefcase. Once they left, Jason screamed in triumph. He picked Vanessa up and spun her around the office. Feeling invincible, Jason ordered his staff to rent out the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria for that very night. He was going to throw the most extravagant comeback gala the city had ever seen. But his malice didn't stop there. He instructed his assistant to hand-deliver a premium, gold-leaf invitation directly to Audrey's corporate headquarters. Inside, Jason handwrote a vicious, mocking note. I invite you to witness how a real man builds a billion-dollar empire from scratch, without needing a single dime or a drop of pity from a pathetic woman like you. Miles away, in her penthouse office, Mr. Kingsley walked in carrying the gold leaf invitation. He placed it on Audrey's glass desk. Boss, the fool sent you an invitation to his own funeral. He is throwing a massive gala tonight to celebrate the contract he just signed with our undercover Swiss proxy firm. He walked right into the trap without a second thought. He legally mortgaged his life, his land, and his company to us, just as you planned. Audrey opened the envelope and read Jason's handwritten mockery. A dark, terrifyingly calm smile graced her lips. She didn't rage. She possessed the chilling patience of an apex predator watching its prey happily waltz into the slaughterhouse. His predictability is almost boring. His arrogance is the very weapon that will destroy him, Audrey said softly, her voice echoing with lethal authority. Kingsley, prepare the forensic accounting files showing the millions his lovely secretary embezzled from him. Prepare the authentic, legally registered land deeds and copyright patents for the Diamond Crest Resort, which are solely in my name. Tonight, we attend his little party. Let him fly as high as he wants into the clouds. When I clip his wings tonight, I want him to hit the concrete so hard his bones shatter beyond repair. Night fell over New York City. The Waldorf Astoria's grand ballroom was packed to the brim with bankers, politicians, and socialites who had previously abandoned Jason, but flocked back hearing rumors of his miraculous foreign bailout. Jason and Vanessa stood on a brilliantly lit stage, basking in the applause and fawning praise. Vanessa wore a dress dripping with excessive jewels, flaunting her status as the queen of this new empire. They laughed uproariously, entirely unaware that the ticking time bomb beneath their feet was at zero. Amidst the clinking of champagne glasses, the massive double doors of the ballroom were thrust violently open. The ambient chatter died instantly, replaced by a suffocating, heavy silence. Audrey walked into the ballroom. She looked nothing like the woman from the hotel launch. Tonight, she wore a breathtaking, midnight blue haute couture gown, paired with a stunningly elegant silk scarf. She radiated the terrifying, majestic aura of an untouchable empress. She walked with slow, calculated precision, flanked by Mr. Kingsley and a phalanx of elite security personnel who kept the crowd at bay. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Vanessa glared from the stage, her face contorting with jealous rage. Jason, however, smirked. He grabbed the microphone, eager to publicly execute his ex-wife's dignity. Good evening, everyone, and a very special welcome to my ex-wife, who actually found the courage to show her face tonight. Jason's voice boomed over the speakers. I am so glad you came, Audrey. I want you to see with your own two eyes how the man you tried to destroy has risen to the absolute top using his own brilliance. Your little threats meant absolutely nothing to me. Audrey stopped right in the center of the room, standing at the foot of the stage. She locked eyes with Jason. Her face was as cold as a glacier. Carry on with your little show, Jason. I'm not here to reminisce. I'm just here for the main event. Don't mind me. Show the world what you've built. Audrey replied, her voice unamplified, but cutting through the silence with lethal clarity. Vanessa snatched the mic from Jason, laughing maliciously. Look at you, Audrey. Showing up just to watch the man who threw you away become a king. You should learn your place. After tonight, Jason is untouchable. Audrey simply offered a faint, cryptic smile. Brimming with cocky confidence, Jason took the mic back and signaled the AV booth to dim the lights. He held a remote clicker in his hand. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I unveil a project that will change this city forever. My own personal masterpiece, the Diamond Crest Resort. Jason aggressively clicked the remote, throwing his arms wide open, waiting for the thunderous applause as the massive projector screen behind him lit up. But there was no applause, only collective gasps of horror and confused murmurs from the elite crowd. Frowning, Jason lowered his arms and turned around to look at the massive screen. His heart instantly stopped. The blood drained from his face. It wasn't a rendering of a resort. Displayed in 4K resolution were heavily redacted banking wire transfers. They highlighted dozens of illicit transactions funneling millions of dollars from Jason's corporate accounts directly into offshore shell companies registered to Vanessa. What the hell is this? Who hacked the system? Turn it off! Jason screamed in sheer panic, violently mashing the buttons on the clicker. It did nothing. Vanessa turned whiter than a ghost. Her entire body began to convulse with terror. As her secret embezzlement was broadcast to the wealthiest people in New York, she slowly backed away from Jason. trying to melt into the shadows. Before Jason could even process his mistress's betrayal, the screen flashed to the next slide. It was a scanned copy of a certified New York State land deed for the 50-acre plot where the resort was to be built. But the name printed in bold black ink at the bottom wasn't Jason's holding company. It read, sole proprietor, Audrey. The ballroom erupted into chaos. The investors and politicians realized they were witnessing a monumental, catastrophic fraud in real time. The elite guests stared at Jason with pure disgust, realizing he was nothing but a pathetic con artist. Jason backed up until he hit the projector screen. His vocal cords seized up. He stared at Audrey, who stood perfectly still with that faint, icy smile. The horrifying reality crashed down on him. He hadn't outsmarted anyone. He had sprinted blindly into the most elaborate, inescapable trap ever set. Suddenly, Mr. Kingsley marched past Audrey and ascended the stage stairs with terrifying authority. Trailing right behind him were several NYPD detectives and men in federal suits, immediately locking down all the ballroom exits. No one was leaving. Kingsley ripped the microphone out of Jason's trembling hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention?" Kingsley's voice thundered. "Tonight's event is a complete farce orchestrated by this delusional criminal. Jason deliberately stole the master blueprints of a mega project legally copyrighted by Mrs. Audrey. Furthermore, he fraudulently pledged land he does not own as collateral." "That's a lie! I found it in my basement! You framed me!" Jason shrieked, his voice cracking hysterically. Mr. Kingsley reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a copy of the contract Jason had signed that morning. He shoved it in Jason's face. "Do you recognize this, Jason? You were so blinded by greed you didn't even investigate your Swiss investors. The venture capital firm you signed with is a shell corporation owned entirely by Mrs. Audrey. You signed a legally binding debt agreement with your own ex-wife." Jason felt like he had been struck by lightning. His eyes darted to the contract, locking onto the penalty clause. "As clearly stipulated in the contract, you happily signed," Kingsley continued mercilessly. "Any violation of intellectual property triggers an immediate penalty of 100 times the initial investment. Because you pledged your corporate tower, your stocks, your bank accounts, and your Hamptons home as collateral, as of this very second, every single asset you possess is legally seized by us to pay your penalty. You own nothing, Jason. Your company is gone. Your money is gone. You are billions in debt, and you will rot in federal prison if you can't pay it. Your destruction is absolute." A collective gasp echoed through the room. It was the most brutal corporate execution Wall Street had ever witnessed. Jason collapsed to his knees on the stage. He dug his fingernails into his scalp, tearing at his hair. A wave of regret so agonizingly massive hit his chest that he physically couldn't breathe. He had thrown away his savior and marched himself to the guillotine. In the midst of his psychological breakdown, Jason's bloodshot eyes snapped toward Vanessa, who was tiptoeing down the back stairs to escape. Rage exploded in his brain. Jason lunged like a wild animal, tackling Vanessa to the hard floor. "You betrayed me! You stole my money? Explain yourself, you venomous snake!" Jason roared, his hands gripping her designer dress. His face twisted in maniacal fury. Vanessa shrieked, thrashing wildly to break his grip. Seeing the NYPD detectives moving in, and knowing she was cornered in front of hundreds of people, Vanessa dropped her sweet facade. "Get your filthy hands off me, you broke loser!" Vanessa screamed, spitting in his face. "Yes, I stole your money. I only ever wanted your cash to buy my jewelry." "You actually thought I loved you? You are the dumbest, most easily manipulated mark I've ever met. You threw away a billionaire wife for me. Now you're a homeless beggar and you think I'm going to stick around? I'd rather die." Her words drained the last ounce of life from Jason's soul. His grip loosened. His heart shattered into a million unfixable pieces. The man who sacrificed his loyal wife for a younger, flashy mistress was now facing the ultimate bitter truth. He had been used, drained, and discarded. Taking advantage of his shock, Vanessa kicked Jason hard in the chest, sending him sprawling on the floor. She hiked up her gown and bolted through the kitchen service doors, fleeing the hotel into the dark Manhattan streets. Her plan was to run back to the corporate headquarters, grab the duffel bag of stolen cash she hid in a locker, and flee the state tonight. Audrey stood silently in the center of the room, watching Jason sob hysterically on the floor. The sound of his pathetic wailing echoed as the elite guests quickly evacuated the room, treating Jason like a diseased rat. Audrey turned around slowly. Her footsteps were calm and measured as she walked out of the ballroom, leaving the ruins of Jason's arrogance behind. But the punishment was far from over. Vanessa sprinted down the damp, cold streets, her lungs burning. She flagged down a cab, demanding to be taken to Jason's corporate tower. She kept looking out the rear window, terrified the NYPD was tailing her. She arrived at the dark, deserted parking garage and sprinted down to the sub-basement storage lockers. Her hands shook violently as she unlocked her locker. She sobbed with relief when she saw the heavy black duffel bag stuffed with millions in embezzled cash. She hugged the bag, envisioning a new life in South America. But as she turned to run for the exit, blinding high-beam flashlights clicked on from the dark shadows. Heavy combat boots echoed on the concrete. 4 massive, terrifyingly violent men stepped out, blocking the exit. They were enforcers for the Russian mob operating out of Brighton Beach. Vanessa's blood ran cold. To fund her insanely lavish lifestyle and keep up appearances with the elite, she had borrowed heavily from loan sharks, assuming Jason's new billionaire status would easily pay it off. But news of Jason's catastrophic bankruptcy had hit the underworld instantly. "Where do you think you're going, sweetheart?" The lead enforcer growled, his voice echoing in the concrete basement. "We heard your sugar daddy just lost his entire empire. You think you're gonna skip town with our money?" Vanessa dropped to her knees, hugging the duffel bag. "Please, give me more time. Jason is dead weight, but I have millions in this bag. Take it. Take all of it. It covers my debt. And then some. Just let me leave the city alive." Unbeknownst to Vanessa, a shadow detached itself from a concrete pillar nearby. Jason, who had managed to slip away from the hotel before the feds formally arrested him, had tracked her here, hoping against hope that she had a shred of humanity left and would help him. He stood in the shadows, his tuxedo ripped and stained, looking like a walking corpse. He listened as Vanessa begged for her life. "Jason is the most pathetic, gullible idiot on earth." Vanessa shrieked to the mobsters. "I never cared if he lived or died. He threw away his real wife for me. He is garbage. Take the bag and let me leave him to rot." Hearing this final, brutal confession, Jason stepped out of the shadows. His footsteps dragged. The mobster smirked, looking at the broken man. Vanessa whipped her head around, her eyes widening in pure shock. "So this is who you really are, Vanessa," Jason whispered, his voice raspy and dead. "I destroyed my marriage for you, and you trade my life for your own." Vanessa didn't even try to fake it anymore. She sneered. "What did you expect? Loyalty? True love? We are both terrible people, Jason. The only difference is I'm smart enough to survive, and you're drowning in your own stupidity. Goodbye, Jason." Vanessa shoved the bag of cash at the mobsters and sprinted for the stairwell. But before she reached the first step, the deafening wail of NYPD sirens flooded the garage. Red and blue lights illuminated the concrete. A SWAT team swarmed the basement from all sides, weapons drawn. Audrey's lawyers had tipped off the feds about the embezzlement cash. The mobsters immediately dropped the bag and raised their hands. Vanessa screamed hysterically as 2 officers slammed her against the hood of a cruiser, tightly snapping heavy steel handcuffs onto her wrists. She kicked and sobbed, begging for mercy, but no one cared. Jason stood frozen like a statue, watching the woman who ruined him get dragged away into a squad car. He had nothing. His penthouse was seized. His company was gone. His friends had abandoned him. Jason stumbled out of the parking garage into the brutal New York night. The sky broke open, unleashing a torrential, freezing downpour. The icy rain battered his body relentlessly. Thunder cracked, echoing the shattering of his life. He walked aimlessly for hours, drenched to the bone, his designer shoes ruined in the filthy puddles. The freezing cold brought back agonizing memories of Audrey cooking him warm soup on rainy nights in their tiny first apartment, Audrey rubbing his back when he was stressed, Audrey smiling at him with pure love. The dam broke. Jason fell to his knees in the middle of the empty street, wailing in agony under the thunderstorm. He realized too late that he had thrown away the most precious diamond in the world to chase after a worthless piece of glass. Without realizing it, his exhausted feet carried him to the Long Island Railroad, and hours later, he found himself walking up to a colossal, gated estate in the Hamptons. This was Audrey's true primary residence, a fortress of wealth and power. Jason stood trembling before the massive wrought iron gates. Mud covered his torn tuxedo. He gripped the cold iron bars, dropping to his knees in the muddy puddles at the entrance. He bowed his head and screamed into the storm. Audrey, please help me! Audrey, please just come out! Jason screamed, his throat tearing. I know I'm a fool. I was blinded by my ego and that venomous snake. I know everything I had was because of you. Please, I can't live without you. Let me be your husband again. I'll be your servant for the rest of my life. I'm so sorry, Audrey. I'm so sorry! He banged his head against the iron gates, weeping like a broken child. The security guards in the booth just stared at him with blank, unsympathetic faces. After what felt like an eternity of begging in the rain, the heavy mechanical gears groaned. The massive gates slowly swung inward, leaving a gap. Jason snapped his head up, his swollen red eyes filled with desperate hope. From the long, manicured driveway, Audrey walked toward the gate. Her steps were elegant and unhurried. Mr. Kingsley walked closely beside her, holding a massive black umbrella to shield her from the storm. Audrey wore luxurious, warm cashmere loungewear. She looked like a goddess untouched by the misery of the mortal world. The contrast was staggering. Jason kneeling in the filthy mud, and Audrey standing in the warm glow of ultimate power. Audrey stopped a few feet away from the gate. She looked down at him. There was no pity, no anger, just a terrifying, hollow emptiness. It was a look reserved for an insect. Audrey, please! Jason whimpered, pressing his hands together in prayer. I'm begging you. I confess to everything. Take back the penalty. Let me come home. Audrey took a slow breath, absorbing her absolute victory. Your tears are entirely worthless to me, Jason, she said, her voice piercing the sound of the rain. You aren't crying because you lost me. You are crying because you lost your money and your power. Jason choked on a sob, shaking his head frantically. Do you remember what you said to me in that hotel lobby? Audrey continued, her tone merciless. You grabbed my coat. You told me to get out or you'd divorce me. You looked at me with pure disgust and threw me away. Jason lowered his head into the mud, weeping uncontrollably in shame. Now, the universe has balanced the scales, Audrey said with chilling finality. You only apologize now because you realize who I am. The door to my forgiveness was permanently sealed the moment you laughed while signing those divorce papers. You threw me away in my simplicity. Now I am throwing you away to the gutter where you belong. Never show your face here again. You ceased to exist to me the moment I walked out of that lobby. Without a second of hesitation, Audrey turned her back on him. She didn't look back. Mr. Kingsley signaled the guards. The heavy iron gates slammed shut with a deafening metallic clang, locking Jason out in the freezing storm forever. Jason reached his bloody hand out through the bars, grasping at the empty air as Audrey's silhouette disappeared into the mansion. Under the relentless downpour, Jason's agonizing screams of regret were swallowed by the storm, buried alongside his dead arrogance. Time moved quickly, executing the laws of karma with flawless precision. Vanessa, the woman whose greed knew no bounds, was sentenced to 20 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary for grand larceny, wire fraud, and corporate espionage. Stripped of her diamonds and silk dresses, she wore a scratchy orange jumpsuit. She ate from a metal tray, spending her days weeping in a cold cell, realizing she had traded her entire life away for an illusion. But Jason's punishment was vastly more poetic and agonizing. To pay off the mere interest of his insurmountable debt to Audrey's firm and avoid life in prison, Jason's assets were entirely liquidated. He was forced into manual labor. Fate cruelly brought him back to the very Manhattan hotel he had so proudly inaugurated. Jason now wore a faded gray janitor's uniform. Every day, he held a wet mop, scrubbing the pristine marble floors of the grand lobby, the exact spot where he had publicly humiliated and banished his wife. Whenever wealthy VIPs walked past, Jason had to bow his head, hiding his aged, miserable face. His heart bled every single day, watching his majestic building being enjoyed by others while he scrubbed the dirt from their shoes. His mental torment was a life sentence of regret that no amount of tears could ever wash away. Meanwhile, across the country in the sun-drenched hills of California, Audrey stood on a beautifully decorated podium. She wore a stunning white pantsuit, radiating the brilliance of a self-made titan. With a bright, commanding smile, Audrey cut the silk ribbon to inaugurate her true masterpiece, the Diamond Crest Resort. Hundreds of the world's most powerful figures erupted into a standing ovation. Audrey looked out at the horizon, her heart incredibly light. She had survived the darkest betrayal, forged her tears into an unbreakable sword, and now stood at the very top of the world as a true conqueror. Justice had been served beautifully, leaving her with a legacy of triumph that no one could ever take